All right, welcome everybody to the Sprint Jump Throw Performance Podcast. I'm Joel Reinhardt along with Andrew Cormier. Very lucky today to have on Joel Smith. He's the founder of JustFlySports.com and just a great resource all around for both track coaches and strength coaches. So thanks for coming on, Joel.
Hey, thanks guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Cool. We'll hop right into our first question here. So we started touching on it a little bit. That's why I want to get recording. But what have been some of the most influential moments for you that have taken you to pursuing Just Fly full time and then getting into the high school realm out in Ohio?
Yeah. So, well, I'll try to. That could be a really long story or a medium story or short story. I'll try to aim for the short, medium end of things. So, Just Fly Sports. Funny enough, like when I was in college, I already see where my brain's going. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a long story, so I'm gonna have to cut it as short as I can. But okay, so I had a lot of anxiety in college, a ton around just like what major should I do and all that business, because I never had a careers class. Like no one sits you down and is like, hey, like here's what this job is, here's kind of what it pays, outlook, blah blah blah. And maybe there is a little bit of that. You have to look it up yourself a lot of times. And I just remember I like sports. I was like, I'm gonna do sports medicine or exercise science or something, and I like that stuff. And what is there? And it's like, okay. And I started as an athletic training major. It's like, okay, you could make $35,000 a year and work all these hours and go to sit and twiddle your thumbs at a football game. Like I've said that's not what they do at all the time. So I'm not like trying to pick on anyone, but it's just like, and so I dropped that athletic training, got into strength and conditioning. But even that, you talk to strength coaches, and I feel like the initial strength coaches I talked to, like, were the type perhaps that like to brag about how many hours they worked and how much of a grind it was. Because I do think sometimes people can like really try to push that hard. I honestly think that in a lot of, especially in the Power 5 schools and in non-football, it's really not that bad. Anyways, but I don't know. It just didn't seem like a great outlook for that either. And so I had a lot of anxiety and like, it's like, I have to choose this career track. And I remember someone asked me my senior year, they're like, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think I want to be a track coach and then have like a website on the side. And, maybe I'll make enough to like eat and have a roof over my head. This being my perception of, everything. I had no idea what some of these, some track and strength jobs pay. I think there was a lot of doom and gloom and anxiety on my end. And so anyways, long story short is I ended up being a track coach for 6 years with the strength and conditioning. It's kind of like a lower, like, I guess I could say I minored in it, but I always entertained the idea of being called a strength coach or was a strength coach. I have my certifications and all that. And it was 3 years into my job at Wilmington College. I spent 4 years there that I was just like, I do not want to be in this position. Basically meaning your success as a coach, sport coach, is more so based off your ability to recruit than anything else. It's 80 to 90% of it is your ability just to get good kids in the door and manage them good enough that I would say managing maybe 70%, because you have to be a good manager once those kids come in. You really do. And I learned more about that the more great coaches I spent time around. But at the end of the day, you got to recruit. And I just thought to myself, wow, I love training and I just love like all these elements of what makes us human so much. But I don't want to say my success was defined by the fact that I will be on the phone more than the next guy during the week in my nights and weekends. And just to say I won and my team won because I was willing to spend more. And now I feel like that is, I don't want to have that, like, I don't want to call it a victim mentality, but like, I don't like look down on those people who do that, because that, I think that's part of life, that it's good to be great at something. I just realized that's not what I'm necessarily wired or meant to be great at this life. I just am more of the essence of things. And I think great coaches are too, absolutely. But yeah, you know what I'm saying. So that, and just like working at the level of the school that I did, I'm seeing a lot of those kids come in and not graduate or transfer or fail out. And just realizing, and this is another can of worms, but just thoughts on the college and university system in general. And I'm just like, I do not want to be here. And again, the people I worked with taught me immense amounts at Wilmington College. It made me the coach I am. There's so many people there who were profoundly impactful on me. And I was in many ways a terrible coach when I walked in the door there and a much better coach when I left. So I'm not diminishing the experience, but it's just one of those things where, and sorry, if there's any kid out there who's thinking of going to Wilmington College, sorry, administrators at Wilmington College, apologize. So I was just like, I can't. And it's like one of those things you were going to do something. I always said I was going to start a website. And I remember it was my third year. I was at Barnes and Noble, like looking at books on how to code and like all this stuff. And I'm just kind of like, I remember it was something maybe Dave Tate with, you have your big plate and like you're good at that, and you know you need to outsource stuff. And so I'm just like, who am I kidding? If I try to code a site, this is going to take me 10 years. I don't have the time. I was the ADD kid in pre-calc and computer programming. I mean, I was basically helped along in my computer programming class in high school to put out a mediocre. I didn't know anything. It was terrible. So I got with a javelin thrower of mine. His name was Jake Clark. He was 21 when we partnered together and started it. And so he does all the back end stuff. And I mean, and he's grown as I wish I could show you like these iterations of the front page of the website as he's grown and I've grown and the website's grown. It's really amazing. But I'm super blessed to have been connected with him. I mean, it's one of those things that was meant to be, because he's awesome. And he's like all the qualities that I'm not, very like realistic and has an awesome mind for the art. Whereas I'm like hyper like idealistic and like hyper optimist idealist. And he's extremely like realist. So that's been a really good thing. So yeah, I started it there. And it was funny because I had so much anxiety at Wilmington about just getting kids in and recruiting. Cause I mean, I'm dealing with 10 other schools or 9 other schools in the conference, and that 8 of which are better and some far better than us. And so it's like, you just have to, it was so hard to get kids in the door, especially girls. I had anxiety to the point that I remember I actually went to the ER one day because I thought I had chest pains, when it was really like a stomach, maybe pre-ulcery thing, because I'm like, I'm going to not get kids in and lose my job and all this stuff. And so it was just really hard. And there's good coaches on D3 who do get released because of that, who are coaches, but they just are at a school that's really hard to recruit. And the only way to be successful is just to be a recruiter who can also is good at the recruitment. And so, you know, anyways, started that. And then that actually opened the door to get me the job at UC Berkeley. Initially in the door just as a specialist or a strength coach to work for track. I've ended up expanding into swimming, aquatics, had the opportunity to work with a lot of awesome athletes and really top-notch coaches that, again, transform me in a different way. Continue to just play sports through all that. Because honestly, at the end of the day, I've learned throughout the years that I'm born to be an entrepreneur. I've always kind of marched the beat of my own drum. I don't really do that well with, I mean, even if you're an entrepreneur, you still have the dons, you still have rules, but I always liked making my own rules and things. And that led me to just saying, hey, I don't want to just, I like working with college athletes, but I don't want to be all I'm about. And I know the NCAA has a lot of restrictions on exactly who you can work with. And it's just like, look, I want to be able to work with anybody at any given time in any context. And I want to work with a really wide expanse of people. And I also want to be able to move to a area of the country that's affordable. That was a big part of it too, to be honest. So I'm here in Cincinnati now, and I got partnered up. And it's funny how when you take that leap of faith, the universe conspires, because literally on the drive over here, like it was the last day, like Ty Leash, a guy who works at Evolution Fitness or Fitness, he's like, hey, come work out with me at my gym. Turns out it was 5 minutes away from where we were when I was staying, the house I was staying. And then a week later, I'm talking with the owner about a partnership program. So I'm going to be partnered up with the podcast studio out of their new place. And it's really cool. So I'm super excited. And I landed on my feet. So we're excited to see where this goes.
That's awesome. What originally kind of drew you to even just wanting to have the website? Like, what was the natural kind of like inclination for you that really helped you like mold that idea?
Yeah. So I think the beauty of the internet is it's really good for people who, let's just say I'm a believer that, well, as anyone should be, that you are the product of your parents in terms of your beliefs on finances and success and wealth and risk. And at one point my dad's like, hey, maybe you should look at working in a factory. This is when I was 24, cause it's just like, I think he saw how poor the coaching outlook was and I wasn't getting any job interviews. And of course in my mind, like, hell no, like, I'll get my PhD before I do that. And for me, if you know me getting a PhD is like admitting defeat, because that's just not how I'm wired. I'm better off not in a lab. I mean, not to discredit anyone who does that. It's just not my path, but that was I remember saying, I was like, if I fall flat on my face, I guess I'll just get my PhD and just, do that. Cause I mean, I like information and teaching and disseminating and stuff, but so anyways, so, oh yeah. So I'm trying to remember where I'm going. I'm off on a tangent in my mind, but like, I think that we're a product of our parents. Honestly, I feel like, I mean, this is a little weird. This is my weird side, but I feel like we're a product of generations of beliefs. And I think that in this day and age, the internet allows for such a soft start with zero risk to so many people. And so for me, it was like this gentle, like when I was 23, I actually started a blog called Jumps Coach 214, and it was 214 because that was my high jumping meters, and I was obsessed with my own. I didn't know what else to put. I was obsessed with my own performance, and so it's like this soft start that there's no risk. You don't have to like take out anything, and that like rolled itself into eventually me small, like bigger risk, but not really, starting partnering, to start a website and kind of making it more official 5 years later. And I actually had a decent following by that age. By the time Just Fly Sports was started when I was 27, we did our first like free ebook and we had 300 signups like in a day. And so I had a following before that. I don't know how many people know that at this point, because actually, if you look at some of my old videos on YouTube, I just hit the YouTube thing at the early stage where if you type in plyometrics, just those up, because I just did it early. I didn't know what I was doing, and it's super unprofessional quality, but people knew who I was. And so, but that eventually just learning more about myself, just conquering my limiting beliefs, doing tons of like personal development led me to the point where I was able to say, you know what, I'm going to jump like to a thing where I'm the sole breadwinner. I'm doing my own health insurance. I got 2 kids and I got this. And I think I almost am like tingling saying that because it means a lot to me, because that was, at age 36, I made that decision, and it was really a 10 to 15 year process to the point where I had the guts or the balls or whatever you want to say it to do that. I mean, it was in my dreams that I actually had to leave, like, because I left when COVID was like hitting and the economy was a little uncertain, but actually it ended up being good for virtual businesses. But like, I mean, I had it in my dreams even that I still needed to leave. Like it's one of those things that it's just part of you. And I mean, no discredit to Cal. I mean, honestly, when I left that place, like I was so overcome with gratitude. Like, honestly, like I was like, you could ask my wife, I was breaking down in the car, not with sadness, but just with complete gratitude for that place, because it totally transformed me. So yeah, just a lot of personal development, a lot of things that, and I think people talk about this too, like Brett Bartholomew talks about it, like, coaches getting over self-limiting beliefs and money and everything like to do with that. So it's just been a giant project to be where I am now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool to hear. And even too, like the level of like self-awareness of like, hey, this is what I'm currently doing, but I'm setting myself up in these other avenues, and not having I don't know, like you said, like there can almost be like the fear of like, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. And if you hadn't set up the infrastructure beforehand and put things moving in like behind the scenes, then it would have been much tougher. But you had the foresight to even know early on, like, all right, this super duper structured setting of NCAA athletics maybe isn't the 100% path for me. So if I can start to set up things outside of that, I'll eventually be able to take the leap. Because obviously you couldn't have gone from working at Cal to starting the website and, maybe taking that leap. So having the background to do it at the same time, because I feel like that's where some coaches struggle, is like, oh, I'm working here, and if I start doing this side thing, then it's like I don't care about my job as enough, and it's like, whoa, like you have enough hours in the day if you're just smart and divvy up your time. And it doesn't mean you care less about that. It just means you enjoy other things and are setting yourself and your family up in a good spot.
Yes. And I mean, you guys know it as well as I do. And every job I've ever worked at, there's a time in the day to improve yourself and to do other things. I mean, a lot of people just spend it just talking to coworkers, gossiping, maybe whining about something, or positive things, obviously, like that's probably, I mean, it's, you don't want to criticize and create a straw man or post or whatever, but I mean, we have time to improve ourselves. And it's like, I think yeah, I'll just leave it at that. There's always time to do something.
Yeah. I mean, when you go about personally in terms of improving yourself, it seems like you tend to find ways that I guess aren't as, I don't know, like popular at the time, I would say, or like as trendy. And I feel like you find really creative ways to try to improve yourself, and like just from what you post on social media. So like what kind of brings you to doing that, I guess, or how do those ideas present them to you, like to you, and then how do you kind of take it and run?
Yeah. So are you talking about just where do I find, like what type of reading and personal practices do I do for personal development or coaching or personal development more?
You can go with both.
Yeah. So, well, personal development is interesting. Like because I honestly, some people will say, well, man, I've gotten to the point where I don't even read books on coaching or coaching information. It's all other, and that works into coaching. And I think that's cool. Like, that's a cool way to put it. I don't think I'm quite there yet. I do think a lot of my reading is, well, I'll just say this is I think that the more I develop myself as a person, the better coach I get and the better results my athletes get. And it's weird to say that on some level, but there is, you guys are gonna think of it. No, I'm sure you guys get it, but like, I think I've learned there's an energy to people that, and it's more than just buy-in. I think buy-in is just the term, but like there's an energy to a great leader. Like there's charisma and there's something that they put into you that gets you just fired up on all levels, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, physiological, all the pipes that Jay Schrader says. And it's important. I think that, and especially too, as I've worked with, got the opportunity to really work with elite coaches. I've had the opportunity to work with Olympic head coaches on the men's and women's side. And you just start to see a little bit, how they operate. And you start to see, I feel like the athletes will get their best experience when I'm the best person I can be. And part of that too is there's a lot of very crude words I could use to describe myself when I was at Wilmington, because I was selfish would probably be the best one. And because I almost got fired from that place I think it's because I wasn't keeping the weight room clean enough when I didn't get paid to do it for one of the things. And I also failed to show up for a final exam I was giving because I got the time wrong. Yeah, that was bad. That was really actually not very good at all. But I had a couple athletes who were very upset that I didn't spend as much time with them as other athletes. And I didn't. I prioritized my time on the people who were going to be able to go to nationals and put points on the board and set school records, because that was my chance to add my resume and get a better job. And because at the time I was like, I just want to be a D1 track coach and be the best jumps coach ever. Like, kind of is my deal. And if you ask me now, that's not what my mission is. Which is funny because I was so obsessed with that for so long, and I still kind of am. But but for me, I needed Cal to be, for me as the track coach, to be the track coach hat was to say, hey, you're good because your team won and your kids set school records and X, Y, Z. But then when you're a strength coach, you have the whole team there and who gets the glory when that group wins. Your job is to actually edify every single athlete as much as possible. And that even means some of the victories might be that kid who never gets to play or is one of the bottom kids, but you help them do a emotional breakthrough, because they felt better about themselves because of something they might have done. Or maybe not even a physical lift, but you just were taught them something about themselves through breathing and calmness and those things too. And I needed Cal and being a strength coach to get over myself and look at me shaking the hand of my athlete who won nationals on the podium. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going in spiritual development, or I call it spiritual. By that, I just mean all levels of existence, whatever that means to you. I've always been interested in that, but I never really got into it till age 29, I would say. And I actually started reading on at 29. And you see some of these people who are really uber successful in that realm, and they started really early. And I feel like I'm rambling. I apologize. I did a really bad job of having a solid track there. So all I'll say is I do personal reading every morning on something that's more personal development based, that's psychology based. I do a lot of reading on psychology, and I'm very into everything that makes us who we are, what our pre-existing beliefs, limiters are, mental heuristics, biases, knowing myself, knowing where all that is for me. and just trying to have experiences that help me break my ego down a little bit to serve people more. It's always been a part of me. I mean, I've always had a spiritual directive since I was young. So that's always been there. But as I've got into coaching, it's been more like, how can I use that development to serve people more? And so it's always a part of my life. And I'm still working on it a lot. Because I say that doesn't mean that I've reached any milestone. There's still a strong part of me that 26, 27-year-old Joel that ignored a lot of his athletes still does exist. And so I'm trying to continually be better in that realm. And so, yeah, that's still something I'm working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, it goes back to just the self-awareness. And I mean, it almost comes down to like trying to provide that opportunity to the younger people as well that you work with. I mean, I feel like that's something as Joel and I have worked together at UMass too, of just like getting kids to be more authentic and more self-aware and wanting to develop like more than just the physical side. Because in reality, compared to a lot of the other things, it's almost everything else that limits the majority of like the physical development that can happen for them.
Yeah, I agree. I had one athlete. This is the cool thing about being a strength coach instead of a track coach. It's because if you're a track coach, you might only work with 6 kids, maybe as many as 20. It depends on kind of where you're at, directly.
Yeah.
But if you're a strength coach, you work with, I was working with over 100 kids a semester for a while. And you get all these different kids of all these different levels. And you really start to see too, because I mean, this is what it was like for me. I don't know, like to me, I almost didn't even want to do strength and conditioning right away because I would just see just lifting weights and sets and reps was not exciting to me. Like if it was just reduced to that, I was like, I'd be sitting there with my thumb at my ass at the end of a session, like watching people do auxiliaries and be like, God, like there's something better to do than this right now. I hope other people, yeah, you guys get it. Like I hope, because I mean, it's not like, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm always trying to figure out what can I put into this thing that can get more out of this. Because if I'm bored, I don't think you guys are excited either right now, unless you're like, sitting there with your sleeves up in the mirror, like, just, and even that, there's some body or self-image, stuff maybe you're painting on too. I don't know, but I mean, maybe not, but like, I remember I had one experience with a kid. He was a tennis player. He was like, tennis players, your top court's 1, your worst court's 6. And then you got a few guys who might end up in court 6 or doubles or none. This guy wasn't even like, he was barely ever in the rotation. One of the bottom guys, really athletic, but he always like had this, like, if I asked him to do something hard, he always kind of had this goofy smile and kind of like just checked out. Like he couldn't deal with something that was asked that was uncomfortable with him. And I remember, and he just never could like break through. And I'm not I'm not a clinical psychologist, but like I remember one time, I remember this like really well. And it's funny because this guy was only on the team through his sophomore year, and then he wasn't. He either got kicked off the team or he just couldn't make it, or something his junior year. Like he just wasn't good enough, and they had more guys coming in. I don't remember the exact circumstance, but I remember we were in the weight room doing weighted push-ups, and he had like 65 pounds on his back, and he had to do 5 or something. And he was, he did 1. I could just see he was starting to check out. I started yelling at him, like cussing at him, like, because I knew he needed someone to bring that kind of energy. I don't know if you hear like Tony Robbins is like nasty at his conferences. If you've actually been inside those conferences, he gets really nasty. And that was a moment that I think that was necessary for whatever reason. I'd never really done something like that before to an athlete. It wasn't mean at all. It was trying to be encouraging as possible. I wasn't like being derogatory whatsoever. But he did his set. Like he actually got through it, and he was never the same after that day. Like he never had that goofy fadeaway smile anymore. And I don't know what it was. Like, and this kid never went on to do anything. But I was like, you know what? I'll take that. Like that to me, that emotional breakthrough of whatever limiter you had and whatever happened in that 10 seconds, you know what? Like maybe he just realized that he could do it, and something got broken. And it's kind of like those moments that I live for a little bit, because you try to like divvy out transfer and all that. And yeah, I mean, there's special strength, and there's definitely field work and technical work. And that was a huge like ass kicker for me, is on some level, is I had to relegate my speed stuff to like club track outside of Cal, and then some private, if I got a private client here and there to do speed work with and online stuff. But it just, I wasn't able to do that stuff that often. So a lot of what I really got into was that's where I really honed in on the emotional side, because there was nothing else to do sometimes. And so that was that became a really big thing, part of it.
Yeah. I guess I've seen that too, as I kind of look at the last even couple months when our guys started to come back, as we were prepping for, at that point, what was our season. We were spending, both because of return to activity, some of it COVID regulations, some of it we were getting ready to play games very soon. Like, we were spending almost no time in the weight room. But our days were still so full because it was, whether it was checking with coach about, going over practice plans and all that, or it was, helping guys get their bodies ready for practice or whatever. And after like a couple of weeks, there was a moment where I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm the strength and conditioning coach, and I haven't coached a session in the weight room in the last 3 weeks, but I've had some of the most fun that I've ever had on my job. Whether it was we started doing close-up film of our receivers in practice, and they were interested in the biomechanics of shin angle drop when they were getting off the line and stuff like that. And it was oh, this is cool. And it's just there are we all know okay, it's easy to be oh, the weight room isn't the end all be all of performance. It's yes, we all know that. But when it was it was funny because it was a very discrete time period. I was oh, I haven't coached a session in the weight room of actual training, quote unquote, in a long time. But we've done so much still with our expertise in terms of getting these guys ready to play, and perform at a high level.
Yeah, I think that in reality, a lot of strength coaches would really enjoy being a track coach or being a powerlifting coach too. Sometimes, just being but I think a lot of strength coaches really enjoy being a track coach if that was a possibility, just because or just doing stuff that's more direct transfer. And Rachel Balkovit talked about this when she made the transition from being a strength coach to being the hitting coach. Yeah. She's like, wow, players are so much more engaged now. They want to know so much more now. It's just, the closer you get to the sports skill, it's just inevitable. And I love strength. I do, but it's just the closer you get to that actual skill element, that the more people really come alive with, their interest and intent. Oftentimes, some people are in the weight room too a lot, but you guys see that, and yeah, how much interested those athletes probably were.
Yeah. Or even the level to which guys start to take ownership over their own physical prep, and even psychological prep as well. But even some breakthroughs that you're talking about, I'm thinking specifically, we had he's a running back on our team who came in from JUCO he was at JUCO for 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. But he came in and it was just he had something. It was a hip flexor type thing that he had always had from high school, and he was just relegated to the fact that oh yeah, my hip flexor just always hurts, and saw him his gait was a little goofy, and I was hey, what's going on with that? And he was oh, it's just acted oh, it's just normal for me, but then getting him to the point where it was no, this is not normal, and and looking at his pelvic mechanics and all the steps that we went through to get him to the point where it was oh, this is what normal movement feels like. It had nothing to do with getting his front squat up or anything like that. It ended up helping improve some of those technical mechanics, just because he had some goofy hip things going on. But it was interesting to see the mental block. We talk about athletes as compensators from a physical standpoint, but he was compensating from a mental standpoint, because he had just gotten to the point where he's instead of stressing about, oh, is my hip feels goofy or my quad feels goofy all the time, he had checked that stress away, and it was just, oh, this is how it is. And so it was almost helping him break through, no, you can feel okay. That was a cool moment. And so as you were saying that, that specific example jumped right into my head. And like you said, you remember it years later, and that's one that I'll remember for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, it's just so cool when that identity just fades away and you realize that you are something stronger than that. It's really, I feel that's really what it's all about, is I kind of, last year I was well, what's my mission statement? Because I feel I should have one. It's helping athletes find their true power. And that can happen, I think, because of a lift that you hit, because you realize you're stronger than you thought you were. But also, like you said, like there's maybe an injury you thought you were or had, or restriction. All of a sudden you realize you're not that, and your body is more powerful, and there's more. And you see, when that stuff happens, you see the emotions, you see the countenance, and everything changes. I think that's one of the really beautiful things.
Yeah. I would say too, I mean, at least in my experience, because I've worked Olympic basically my entire life, is it almost comes more from the female training side of things, when it's like more strength related. But when it comes to, at least in my opinion, a lot of the male athletes, it's almost being able, like those kind of things, like moving without restriction, like not dealing with pain as much, where it's like the female athlete likes to see themselves be able to accomplish more things, have this like absolute number go up, where honestly most of the time the guys just want to like feel better, in all honesty.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I would agree with that. I think so. Yeah, especially with like, as I work with female swimming was my only women's team, but I think if I could say I gave those girls anything in the weight room, in the physical realm, I think they just felt more confident. Like they would say like, oh, I came in and I could barely bench, the 20s or something. And then they would look at how much they improved. And I really think it made a big substantial impact on their confidence. And versus, yeah, like a guy benching, 225 or something. It's like, but all my shoulders hurt, what? Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I can dig that.
Yeah. That's cool. I guess shifting a little bit, I mean, kind of in the same realm of like evolving, but so I forget exactly the timeline of when you released Speed Strength. But I'm curious. We had Fergus on a couple weeks ago, and we're talking about some things from Game Changer, and it was funny because to hear him be like, "Oh yeah, like I love that topic, talking about that," and then there were some other things where he's like, as soon as I published the book, I was like, damn it, I would have changed that. I'm just curious, like, is there anything since you've released the book that maybe not necessarily like looking back, like, oh, I would change that in the book, but like how have some of your ideas evolved since even releasing the book?
That's a good question. So as you are asking that, I'm pulling up my Evernote, because I use Evernote pretty voraciously, and I have a file specifically called V 2.0 book ideas, and literally the first one for Speed Strength probably came in about 2 months after I published it. Like I was like, so I think the big, so I'm just going to get into this notebook right now, so I can pinpoint some stuff, and I stay on track, because I sometimes get off track. So the big one would probably be arms. So in sprint, I think people really like the technical chapter. I do get people posting various pages from throughout the book, but I think the heavy hitter in that book, in my mind, and the one that really took the 3 years to write, was the first chapter, because that was like when I wrote that book, I literally had highlighted the out of every like sprint book imaginable. I bought all the sprint books, like Franz Bosch highlighted almost the whole thing. James Smith highlighted almost the whole, yes. And all the lectures from the big track coaches and all this stuff. And I had this chapter written out that I thought was, a pretty good technical sprint chapter. And then I met a Darian Barr, and I feel this is another thing I just feel like happens is like when you set out to do a project. And for me, it's like, if I'm going to do something, it has to be like every chapter has to have like basically the most updated stuff to my possible knowledge, or I can't put it out. Like it has to be deliver something new that isn't kind of out there already. Or I just feel like, why am I writing this 330 page book just to like drive myself crazy every day? Like, cause I did drive myself crazy every day. But so I met a Darian, like 3 years to write it. Like I met a Darian after the first year of writing it, basically, maybe 6 months. And the reason I reached out to him is because I want to leave no stone unturned. I've seen this guy on the internet a little bit. I know he's around here. Oh, let's check it out. And as I met him, I slowly started rewriting that chapter. Like, and I rewrote it, not just because I'm like, oh, well, this is cool and different and against the grain. And yes, I realize I'm, if I say, where's my contrarian bias? It's like 100, 0. I don't know. It's probably like a 60. Like I like to go against things, but I always double check myself. And to me, the double checking was the results. Like, I remember telling Terry, I was like, all right, like I get, getting my acceleration better, getting athletes acceleration better. Acceleration's, that's easier. It's more strength related. There's probably more tech, but upright running is like, if you can change my 10-meter fly at age 34 and you help me get a PR, then I will just be like, okay, I'm totally sold. And like 4 months later, I ran a 10-meter fly all-time best that I had ever since I had at least the free lap system. And I know it was better than when I ran it one time when I was 24 at UW La Crosse. So I'm like, okay, I think there's something to this. And I was like, and so anyways, that was this. And it's like, when learning from a Darian, it's not like, he's not just going to dictate like stuff to you and you write it down. It's like, you have to do it. And then I'd be like in the shower, like just taking a shower, I'd be like, oh, like that's it. And then I'd go and I have to write it down. And that's how that chapter slowly, and like, I don't want to call it painstakingly, but it just took forever. But like, it took 2 years of that kind of like Satori moment or like eureka moment of just laying that chapter down and kind of piecing that together. So that being said, I did not do a good job in that chapter of really getting into the arms, because there was a lot that I left on the table with the arm and shoulder action. I was just watching Grant Holloway, the 110 hurdle record holder. I think he's the record holder from Florida. Just phenom. And like, you watch him coming out of the blocks next to other guys, and amongst other things, you see his shoulders even doing different things than those guys are doing. He has more options. And so the thing that I wasn't as clear on with the Darian back then was, I guess, that acceleration is a little more backside dominant, at least when coming out of the blocks, and up top end more front side dominant. And I was like, well, why? Like, because I'd kind of try to go out the blocks with my arms behind me, like, I don't get this. But I finally figured it out. And it's more, I mean, I could get the fine details of it, but at the end of the day, it has to do with timing of the shin drop. So shin drop and acceleration is controlled by the actions, the reactions. So the shin dropping on the bottom is the arm, the elbow rising behind on the top. That's the controller. And it's all about timing. Like in strength conditioning, we just want to say, show me the position. What's the magic position my athlete should be in? And now I'm like, I'm the training god. Like, well, I can make an 8-year-old hit a figure 4 and they didn't go any faster. I can tell you that. Like, like, so anyways, it just took me a while to figure that out, because the first time I did, I was like, what the hell? Like, I don't get this at all. And then, so you just finally start to see that in action. But if in acceleration, you go backside with the elbows too long, what happens is it actually throws your center of mass, and you're now in like, upright running, and you're slamming that elbow back too high. It actually throws your center of mass up too hard and it screws up your timing. And that's, and Darian will draw good examples. Like Christian Coleman was first at, he's the world record holder, but like the fastest guy around the 4:2:40. And he does a great job of fixing his arms to front side as he comes up in the race a little bit. Granted, he's just not built for top end for a variety of reasons. He could be a little better, but this guy Kemp ran like a 6'4", maybe 650, I think under. And that guy is lightning out of the blocks because he has awesome backside arms. He's explosive as hell, but he doesn't get out of that later in the race. His arms, he keeps throwing his arms up backside. And I'm demonstrating this, but obviously there's no video. But that's part of the reason he gets smoked, because it's throwing his vertical oscillation off and he doesn't get frontside arms. Anyways, sorry, I would put more about the arms in because that's one of the areas I'm getting at. And then as well as maybe a little bit about torque. I'm actually really exploring right now. There's the big like inside edge, outside edge of the foot, blah, blah, blah. Like it's not really a debate. It's just, how do the best accelerators do it? Is it because of technique? Is it something anthropometric, like that they can do this anthropometrically? They have something different that I don't, that other people don't. What combination exists? And then what's best practice for average Joe and average Jane and little Jimmy and little Timmy and Sally? And so to me, it's been kind of like an exploration-based model. And this is what I would put in, because if you read Speed Strength, I don't have a ton of cues. It's a lot of the book is just, here's how to not mess people up. And so where I've gone is a really exploration-based model of sprint development. And I learned an unbelievable amount on this from a guy named Milton Elms when I was at Cal. He was the consultant at Cal women's swim, and he was a motor learning genius. And so it's like blending his style, like a lot of Feldenkrais stuff. But I mean, I was not a good swimmer. I had to learn to swim. But if there's one guy to teach me how to swim, it was that guy, to actually feel like where I could go well. And so I've kind of blended his exploration-based model onto some of these concepts that you see in elites, and using a lot of like Gary Ward's COG stuff. And I'm starting to kind of get a model that I feel is really good. So anyways, it would be more like an exploration-based model to actually teaching these things. And then I would have a little bit more at the arms for technical stuff. The actual training, I wouldn't probably change a lot. I maybe would have given more examples of how to do French contrasty stuff because I use that a lot. And maybe some more stuff with oscillatory reps because I found that changing the triphasic, that middle one, to oscillatory reps for elastic athletes is an absolute game changer. So I put that in there too. And I did have my Evernote file, but yeah, I think that would probably be it. Otherwise, I could probably go through the list. It's 55 notes on updates. About half of them are speed strength, and about half of them are my vertical jump book. That book needs to be updated way more than speed strength. So those would be some of the main ones.
That's cool. Yeah, and even a note that I just made while you were talking. I'm curious, like, how much did your own language and descriptive abilities have to get bumped up where you're writing a book where it's so much easier, obviously, with sprinting to be like, hey, this thing is happening, here's this video clip. But you don't have that when you're writing a book. So like, did you find yourself having to you've been writing for quite some time, so maybe it was just an over the years process. Like, how much better do you have to describe things when there isn't, maybe a video to go, to jump to in the sprinting realm?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I did have like photo sequences. Yeah. I try to do lines and arrows and all that stuff. In learning from Darian more the last several years, he just does a really good job of video. The best stuff I've learned from him has been in person, getting coached in person, saying, getting videoed, saying, why is it this way? Watching him coach other people and assess their videos. So obviously that's been a big part of it. And then watching him just dissect videos in coach's eye, and you draw in the little sections. And it's like, man, with the internet and the way things are going, it's like that model and the online course model is, at the end of the day, I'll admit it, I wrote a book and I think it's awesome, but the online course and the video model is superior. So I'll say I did it the best I could by, the photo sequences and the lines. And then I do think that there is a literary language element that does come out well in words. I think some people like to read through things and actually have the text and have the explanation and say, okay, like, here's this kind of laid out why. But I've always been a words person. I've always just been, there's something to be about the written word. I think my typing speed goes up about 10, 15 words a minute every book I write too. And so it's just something about trying to I think there's a beauty in the written word still, and just trying to describe stuff. And it helps me think. Like, it helps me just really think about what I'm saying. And so I think because that helps me teach it even when I'm just doing videos and stuff.
Yeah. And that was an area in finding myself reading the book that I was impressed with, is like how much I was able to make mental models for myself just based off of the words, and then how targeted, the sequences of pictures were. And that was, for me, when I got to the end of the book and I was like, oh wow, like what was, even just the technical things that I took away, but even just like in a broader sense of like how I was able to, when I did reading about a section and I'm like, okay, I have a good idea from the pictures and the words of what that looks like, but then maybe I find a video on your or Darian's Instagram of it, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty much what I had in my brain. So that was almost like, I guess, a compliment to you and how dialed in that was in terms of both the description, but then in the pictures as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You passed the test then. I appreciate that.
Cool. I don't know. I made sure I put this in our notes because this is hands down my favorite quote from the book. It was like, the beauty of combining a sprint drill with an actual sprint is that how that drill impacts running can be instantly seen. And I love that, because it was like the, bleeding straight leg skip or straight leg bound into a sprint, and it feels good. And it's just like the value of did that feel super weird, or did it feel like it was supposed to happen? And if it didn't feel like it was supposed to happen, is it actually transferring onto the field of play? Probably not. And some other things, they might serve as good warm-ups or special strength for your hip flexors or whatever it is. But if we're trying to, as coaches, actually impact on, implicit learning that is carrying over when they're thinking about a million different other things. I don't know, that's the one that helped us out a ton, especially in upright, working at upright stuff, getting a little bit of like some like tiny bit of flex knee, scissor bounds into a sprint. Like our skill guys, when we started implementing that, like it was like a party in our indoor facility, because these guys were like, yo, coach, that felt so good. Like, and it was just like, oh, like I didn't have to say anything. It was just like, hey, do that for 20 yards and then run as fast as you can. And they all, oh, that feels amazing. And so that was something where, I mean, you talk about it in the book, like there aren't a lot of cues, and that's part of like, as you get further along and like really transferring these guys over into the field of competition, it kind of has to trend that way anyway. So that's what made, that's part of it for me. That was like, oh, this is good stuff for sure.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. That's really cool. It makes me happy to hear that. And it's like, it's one of those things that, because I always kind of wondered what people were going to do with different parts of the book. And it's, I was even talking about the exploration-based model that I've really, and I guess I was really still doing that back then there. Because it was like, I got some of that, that bleed stuff I got from a guy, Alex Kahn. Fuzz Kahn is a UK track coach. You actually can't get this DVD anymore, which sucks. And I had the DVD, but some coach borrowed it from me and never gave it back, one of those things. And it was all like do a thing, run it out, do a thing, run it out. And it would be like, and I remember I did that warm up with my last year at Wilmington. And one of the coolest things of that was I remember my, like I was a high jumper, I jumped off my left leg really well. But I remember just messing around the gym, and my right leg was always terrible. And I just decided to jump off my right leg. It was like, bam, 3-4 inches higher. I was like, geez, where did that come from? And it's just like, just the integration and the rhythm and I love that you said, it's like, we didn't say anything. And I'm like, yeah, like I don't want to sit here with like, as this coach, like, oh, I have this awesome model and you guys all need to do it. Like, it's just like we need to take the ego out of it a little bit and like put it in the athlete, the beauty of the athlete's subconscious is and able to solve problems. And it's like, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any framework, because obviously, saying a straight leg bound to a sprint is a framework. Because I think people try to paint arguments like, oh, you can't just let them do anything. Well, it's like, we're not just letting them do anything. So I'm glad you got some of it. That's awesome. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on that, but that excites me.
Yeah, that's great. And you touched on it a little bit, like the counter argument of like, oh, you're just letting them do whatever. We talked with Mike Zweifel last week or the week before, and it's like the other side of like, oh, if you're going to argue that we're just letting these guys do whatever, it's almost discrediting the level of framework and work that goes into like setting up those environments or drill constraints to put them in the scenarios that you want. And it's like, well, that is all the work. Like, and then you just you just get to let it flow. Like, it's not like, I know you've talked with Mike several times. It's not like Mike is just rolling out 5 minutes before a session and be like, go play tag. Like, no, that's obviously not the case.
Especially not Mike. We don't play tag.
Yeah, like that's obviously not the case. And so it's almost like you're like, oh, you're just letting them do whatever. It's like, no, that's just discrediting all the pre-work that goes into setting up, really valuable environments for the athletes. So cool. Oh, another thing that you've been posting about recently, and I've become more interested into like, Boo talks about, the simplicity in high intensity work and then the variation in low intensity work. And, the simplicity in high intensity work, we just kind of touched on that with like helping athletes just be athletes by getting out of their way and getting on a million cues in their head. But what are some ways that you are looking to add variation in low intensity work, say with track and field athletes?
Yeah. Well, you set me up, Joel. Like, you just like threw me a big old like softball. I appreciate that. Yeah, because that's something that I mean, at the end of the day, I think that because I have all these like, and I'll explain a few of them, but at the end of the day, the best thing that you can do is to play a game. Like for track athletes, is to play a game. Play racquetball, basketball, ultimate frisbee, soccer, whatever. Maybe have it correspond with the intensity you're trying to find on your day. Like if it's a low intensity day, I don't know, just play sand volleyball and don't try to jump too hard or something. Like I mean, you get so much. Or spike ball is a big one, right? I actually never really played spike ball, but I hear elbows and shoulders kind of get it a lot from that. I don't know if you guys, but it was. I mean, I remember when I was at Wilmington College, we played games all the time, and eventually we started playing games to warm up for workouts. I was like, F it, like, what do these guys rather do? Sit there, get in lines and do lunges and toe touches and A skips, or play ultimate frisbee for 20 minutes. It's like, hands down, without a doubt, ultimate frisbee for just emotionally every level. Like, just not even close. And if we have to do a couple build-ups or semi intense technical things and then get into our workout, cool. I paid for that one day when my star high jumper sprained his ankle. So you could say, because it's like, okay, like, everything in life's a balancing act and risk, reward, and everything. And so it's like, okay, well, how many athletes have to make it through all these games I played and not lose any training time for it to be worth the one guy who sprains his ankle and can't train for a week or two, in his event? Like, I don't know. If it happened once a year, maybe it's okay. But I think I've had someone tell me this is like, like athletes should just be robust. Like, and I say this as funny that when I was coaching at Wilmington College track, that a lot of these guys were playing intramural basketball during the indoor track season. And I actually was kind of like, yeah, and if they get too fatigued, it sucks. But honestly, having been a basketball player in high school, then doing track, I can tell you, when I stopped playing basketball, I lost a lot of pop. Just pop off the ground, and even top end speed and rhythm. And I ran a faster 400 in high school than I did in college, running a ass load of tempo. Like, because I just had rhythm and explosiveness off the ball of my foot and multilateral development and all this stuff that you don't get as soon as you just make a robotic running program. Now, I was an elastic, high novelty person. If you go into like Ross Jeffs and the metabolic runner, maybe they would have been fine. They probably would have been fine, but that was not me. Anyways, I'll say games are number one for sure. I want to play games. And I think about like Doc Yessis was talking about the Soviet volleyball team in the 70s, and they decided to come to the United States and kick our ass. Decided to play soccer the morning of to warm up and have fun, mental relaxation. Because in track, what are you doing? You're running fast and turning left, or maybe you get to jump over something or jump fast, but just mental, like, just be an athlete, be reactive, react to something, somebody. It's who we are. So games are absolutely number one, and you can be creative and make them less risky, whatever way you want. I personally got my highest just jump vertical right after I finished. It was supposed to be a rest day, but I played my Boston racquetball and jumped 35 too. Like, I was like, cool. Like, it just, there's something about reacting that's so key. So outside of that though, if it's a recovery day, I'll give you a one just really good anecdote. One thing that my college coach did, and it's always stuck with me. And, I've vetted all the things I did as an athlete intensely to not be that coach that was like, oh, I did this, so of course do the I have to vet it. I have to make sure, but this checks all the boxes. And I did this through Wilmington College. It was a good experience. I did it with my men's tennis program at Cal when we were doing conditioning stuff. And I feel like it was a great experience because it hits on all levels. And so it's called scramble circuits. My coach, Jeff Bolander, had us do it. And so and this fits with me because I'm ADD and I'm like an on the fly dude. I'm not I do write things down. I have a ton of templates in my online program stuff and a ton. And I feel like I've really gone through, periodization and cycles and 14-day cycles and all that shit. I can do that, but I would rather come up with stuff on the spot and intuit. Like, that's just where I am at. And not to say you can't always do that. You have to have a plan, but I am in the zone the most when I'm like, hey, let's do this creative outlet and try it and see if it works. And so anyways, scramble circuits, what you do, it's like an off recovery day. We're at the track or wherever. We're at a tree arboretum. We're on a trail. Let's run 50 yards to here. We're going to stop at this patch of grass. We're going to do push-ups. Hey, Jimmy, how many push-ups are we going to do? Jimmy says 10, and we all count them together. All right, now we run to another spot. So we'll run 100 yards. All right, we're going to do reverse lunges. hey, Sarah, how many reverse lunges are we going to do? 20 each leg. Oh, damn, Sarah, that's a lot of lunges, but okay. Like, and then the whole team does them together. Let's skip 50 yards over there. And we all skip 50 yards over there. And so it's just like we're doing things together, but the athletes get to pick the number. And so there's like autonomy. There's tons of variation. We might do, I would just put a time. I'd say, hey, Wednesday, team, we're doing scramble circuit for 30 minutes. And we just go all over the auditorium. We go out to the track, come back in, and you try to get everybody involved. And, that way everybody has like autonomy and a say in this whole big thing. And it's not just one person, it's all of us. And there's tons of variation. And it's, again, for me, I loved it because it was free flowing. And there was like this art as a coach where I get to pick what's going to happen next. And it's more of an adventure than it is a written down thing, but not to diminish at all the value of writing things down, because I think that's important too. But that's just something I like. So I'll make that an example, my example.
Yeah, that's great. And we've found that, like, and that's a critique of ourselves that we've had recently with our football guys is, over these last couple weeks, basically from when we found out our season was canceled until now, and tomorrow we're starting some more formal training where we give them a little bit of time off. But in that interim, we had some guys still on campus, and we had a couple days where it was like, hey, we got some lifts in the weight room, still optional. But we did a couple days where it was like, hey, we've got a bin of Frisbees, we've got a couple med balls, we've got like 2 spike ball nets. Do whatever you want for the next hour. And
yes,
I mean, guys would come out of it drenched in sweat. Like, it wasn't, there wasn't the like, oh, the kid who sneaks off in the corner, like, because they just had the fun and guys learning how to play spike ball or whatever. But the kids texting us afterwards, just like, coach, we needed that, and then not even the benefit of that from both psychological and physiological. But then it was like, hey, the workout the next day was just like, even though the next day was like super structured, it was so much better. And it was just like a good reminder of like, oh, like we can, we can still get the physiological output we want with giving them a lot of freedom, autonomy, and just letting them have a lot of fun because, especially in that scenario. But yeah, that's an area that you've been posting a lot recently, and we saw it, and I was like, that is a good reminder of like, okay, let these dudes have some fun, and it goes a long way, not just on the day of, but moving forward as you go. And even just from a relationship standpoint of like, okay, they know we know as players that they've got our backs, and they can kind of sense when we need to like turn it off a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, the connection that comes too, like it's everything. You think of, it's not just a set of exercises, it's human connection and play and it's like Paul Cater, I just did with Paul Cater, and it's funny because like it actually wasn't like a super listened to show, but it was honestly one of the best shows I feel like I've done, and I've learned so much from Paul. But it's like you can't like training, we mentioned this, like training is a celebration of life. Like the best things in life should be in the training program. You know what I'm saying? Like it and if you start looking at it that way, it's like, man, everything's a little bit different now, and I feel like that's just what comes out when you're able to do that kind of thing. That's such an awesome anecdote. Like, really cool. And that they're better the next day. It's just, I love that. I love those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially and it seems to go even farther in college athletics where things are so regimented. Especially in a football realm where there's so many moving parts that in order to run a smooth operation, you have to be a certain level of regimented to not have things just roll into chaos with like 50 staff members and 100 players. And so when you do get the opportunities to insert some of those, just like, hey, you get an hour of whatever you want. They almost like early on, it was the earliest reminder and biggest reminder was early on when some guys were like, what do I do? Like, it was, they almost had like the frozen of like, oh, I can just like do what I want. Like, wait, like they almost had the freeze because you could tell they hadn't been given that opportunity. Especially like from our true freshmen coming from a high school. Maybe it's like a big high school where it was just like boom, 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 boom. It's like, hey, go play ultimate frisbee for an hour. And they're like, okay, like.
What is this place? That's awesome, though. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool.
Have you noticed the pendulum swing a little bit? I mean, I know since I've started coaching, which isn't like anywhere as long, I feel like this is the first time I've heard most of this, like introducing play in open environments, like being very prevalent and growing. Like I haven't seen any old text talking about like the importance of implementing play for a lot of sports.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where. Yeah, I don't know where in the literature it probably really came from. It's almost more like Robert Greene in the Laws of Human Nature talks about like the zeitgeist. It's like the general vibe of like the culture. And I think it's kind of like the pendulum's always going to swing so hard, right? And maybe when strength and conditioning was born, it's just like everything has to get more quantified and quantified and quantified until we're like so like in this just like hole of everything has a number that eventually it's going to start shooting back into free play and gym class. Like it used to be the strength coach, the track coach used to be a physical education major, and the roots was in play. And so I think maybe it's just kind of like a little bit, I don't know if it was Rafe Kelly or Jeremy Frisch. There was some research that basically said as soon as it's a game, like learning goes up like through the roof, like all these endorphins. And it's just, I don't know what or where, but I'm glad that that's starting to change. And it's just like, so to me, I'm like, it unlocks the thing in a college athlete. It's like, oh, recess when I was in 6th grade, this was the best thing ever. And it's just something like that, So anyways, I'm glad it's changing. I'm glad that changes in the air.
For sure. Yeah. And even as I've progressed along over the last few years, I've noticed not only has like polarization increased from, looking at our high intensity and low intensity days, but polarization has increased in terms of like, hey, our high intensity days, very much like holler, record, rank, publish, guys loving it, but it's still almost gamified, even though it's very regimented and quantified. But then polarizing in the opposite way of like, all right, it's a low day, like we're truly going to be as far away from, all right, get on the line, you're finishing this in 16 seconds, even though it's like getting away from that in that, I guess, another way of polarizing the program as we've gone along. And I think we could probably even do it more, and it's only been beneficial as we've gone that direction. So.
Yeah, it is really, we're really stretching the ends out, like the feed the cats and the purity of competition and fun in that. And then the purity of just playing games and being creative. And I mean, you still, even in the 10 flies, like Tony will say, like he'll see guys trying something different. Like you're being creative to try and break your record. You have to be, you can't. So versus, I think maybe that's why they run by themselves in his system versus if you're racing somebody that, and I do think it's important to race people. I really, really do. I mean, I was my fastest ever in college, and on some level, maybe ever, when I was in college racing people all the time. But I definitely see like there's not as much room for that little creativity when you're always racing people. Like I'm not going to be racing somebody and be thinking about, oh, do this tomorrow to beat them and like so. Yeah, I get it. I think that's cool. You're really taking the width out, so there's more that can fit in the middle of the two poles, I guess, if you will. I like that.
For sure. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, we're through our questions. We're right at about an hour, so this should end up being about perfect.
Cool. Yeah, this is
best,
good.
Like the best ones we always have, or they end up going in a million different directions, and we don't even ask any of our questions. So
yeah, I've had a few of those.
Yeah,
those are good.
All of our ones with Tony have been like that, for sure. Cool. Yeah, we'll just do a nice little ending, and then we can stop recording and then get going. So
awesome.
All right, thanks for coming on, Joel. This was great. We were both looking forward to this as we were scheduling this, and did not disappoint. So we appreciate you taking the time.
No, absolutely. It was awesome to chat, guys. I love what you're doing. Thank you for having me on. It was a great talk.
Awesome.
Thank you.